Globally, we're certainly in a waste crisis, and Canada is in an acute waste crisis. Canada produces more municipal solid waste per capita than any other country in the world. We're worse than the United States. We're worse than Japan. We're worse than China. That's municipal solid waste, and that accounts for about less than 3% of the waste we're actually producing. Over 97% of the waste that we produce is produced by industry, by mining, and by agriculture. And this is government statistics. I'm not making this up. The government knows this. The problem is that we're so focused on what individuals do and households do. So people feel very passionate about the environment. They want to be good environmental citizens, and the way they express that, the way they try to care for the environment, is often through recycling. Recycling is highly problematic. It's not a solution to our waste issue at all. It creates environmental problems, it creates pollutants. We're transporting our waste, as the example of Malaysia and Philippines. This is under the guise of recycling, but we're using non-renewable fossil fuels. Recycling is not good for the environment. I believe that Canadians can have a profound impact. And the impact that we can have is making demands on government and industry. The Philippines material, that waste is waste. It isn't recyclable material, right? It's a hodgepodge of all kinds of waste. As I understand it, they haven't even opened all of the containers, so they don't actually know what is in all of the containers. From my understanding, the Malaysian, this is mainly plastic bags coming from grocery stores, etc. That conscientious Canadians have been putting in their blue bins, putting in the recycling. These forms of plastic are inferior forms of plastic, and they're not good for recycling. And recyclers will only recycle materials if there's profit to be made. And as I understand it, these bags were mislabeled. Again, we've also heard from the United States. For instance, we've heard from Michigan that they don't want to take Toronto's waste. We actually have been hearing this for quite some time. The silver lining of this, if there is one, is it provides us an opportunity to really learn about what our waste issues actually are. It's not about getting conscientious Canadians to sort their material better. It's not about that. It's about learning the real limitations of recycling and of disposal, and thinking about waste in a different way. We'll certainly hear from other countries. Now that Philippines has put us on the Asian, at minimum the Asian radar. So we should expect that other countries will similarly be scrutinizing the so-called recycling that we're sending them, and they will be opening up those containers to see exactly what's inside. And we should fully expect more countries to be demanding that we take our waste back. The Canadian government has so far, since 2013, failed to bring back the garbage from the Philippines. So, as I understand it, the Metro Vancouver waste to energy facility has said that they will take the Philippines waste back, and that they will deal with it. It's going to need to be treated before it reaches our shores, and we're going to have to. The waste will have to be very properly handled. Remember, that waste is now traveled all the way across Canada, across the planet, and now it's traveling back to Canada and then across Canada, and this is all using non-renewable fossil fuels. Whether or not they have us over a legal barrel, we certainly have an ethical responsibility. We have a moral responsibility here. We should be, as Canadians, we should be embarrassed by this. We should be doing everything we can to bring that waste back safely, and protecting the environment as much as we can, and the health and safety of the people who are handling that waste. We should be embarrassed by this. We should be demanding a lot of questions. It's wonderful that television programs have picked this up, because we should be asking questions. Not only should Canada take the waste back, we should pay for it. Our federal government should pay for us to bring back and Maybe we should be paying some kind of reparation, a fine as well. There is very little in the way of these kinds of international, fines or whatever. But as Canadians, we should be shocked, we should be embarrassed, and we should be doing everything we can to bring that waste back, and we should pay for it. I see it as sort of horrible and as embarrassing and humiliating, et cetera, as it is. And we need to deal with it, absolutely. Both of those cases and all of the cases that are coming our way. But what it can do in a positive way is it can open a conversation. I think people find this shocking. And so this is an opportunity for us as a country, as a nation, and each of our provinces to be talking about this. This is the surface of this, of what engineers have called the dirty little secret. I think it might make Canadians feel uncomfortable, but I believe Canadians want to know the truth. And I believe Canadians want to do something about it. The reaction of understanding that recycling isn't a solution to waste should be one of frustration and anger, not one of despair. Remember, with recycling, things are only recycled if there's a profit, because the same industries often that own waste management also own recycling. So anything that they can't make a profit of, various forms of plastic, aluminum, glass, etc., they will then divert directly into landfill. All of our waste and all of our recycling is handled by private industry. This is how we've set it up in Canada. Other things can theoretically be recycled, but it's not good for the environment. The classic example is polystyrene, which Kingstonians put in their blue bins, etc., which is then transported to the recycling center in Kingston. Then it's transported using non-renewable fossil fuels on trucks up to Brecken, Ontario, hundreds of kilometers away, where it is liquefied and made smaller. Then it's put on trucks using non-renewable fossil fuels. It's driven to Montreal, where it's put on tankers, where it's then taken to the United States and South Korea to be made into picture frames and things that you would buy at Dollarama, which maybe get one more use. Recycling polystyrene is using a lot of non-renewable fossil fuels. It produces pollutants in the processing of it for recycling, and whereas we're getting one more use out of it before it goes into landfill. What's more environmentally responsible? There is some evidence that there is a correlation between communities that have recycling and increased consumerism. When they see that there is recycling in place, they may be consuming more because they think it's okay, because they think the waste that they're producing from the consumption is being recycled. Aluminum makes some sense to recycle it because originally, remember that these are metals coming out of the ground. So we're using mining. Depending on where it's being mined, depending on, recycling aluminum can make environmental sense in some circumstances. All those forms of plastics, no, it doesn't make environmental sense at all. What it does do is it makes people think that they're doing something good for the environment, and it lets industry off the hook, because an industry doesn't have to be responsible. Industry doesn't have to use less packaging, come up with other forms where we can buy things without having to use a lot of packaging, etc. It takes the burden off of industry. And people don't seem to realize that whether they put it in their garbage can or whether they put it in recycling, it's the same companies. The vast majority of the waste that we produce is produced by the mining industry. There's the oil sands, but there's also just regular mining, uranium, nickel, metals, etc. Then there's agriculture, and most of that is manure ponds, as they call them. There's an unknown amount of military waste that is being produced by the Canadian military on Canadian soil, but also wherever the Canadian military is. So that is unknown because it's pretty much impossible to get statistics on that. Believe you me, I've tried. That's a whole giant question mark in our waste equation that we don't know about. The waste that you produce in your home and I produce in my home and my parents produce in their home is a teeny tiny fraction of the waste that we as a country are producing.